Well, hey everybody, it is Wednesday afternoon. That's right, it's time for another Hammer Away session. You can see what we've got going on here today. Bassist, and he is so much more than that. I've been finding out. I've been into Angel for years, and recently saw them again, and it's fantastic. I want to read a little something from this piece from a website called Bass My Fever. This was a quote from our guest today, Felix Robinson. The bass can drive the energy, put power into the momentum of the arrangement, and solidify the whole musical theme behind the vocals. But very often, bass parts are established by songwriters early in the process to be just support for the keys or guitar and left alone thereafter. Whenever possible, I will find the approach that enhances the composition. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest today, Mr. Felix Robinson. Hello.
Hey, Stu. How are you, buddy?
I am great. It's as with all of my guests, it's an honor to have you on the show. I'm such a music head.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I was really excited when Angel played over at the Wildie over in Illinois. We were going through the line, meeting everybody again. And I say again, because I've been very fortunate to hang with Angel each time they've been here for the last, 4 times, maybe 5 times. And there you were that night. So that was great. Yeah. And I mentioned something to Punky. I go, man, I got to get you on the show. And I heard right behind me, I hear, hey, I'd like to talk to you on the show. I'm like, I would love to have you on the show. And here we are. So,
and here we are.
The one thing that kind of surprised me too recently was I was finding out exactly how many different instruments you've played throughout your years, starting all the way back when you first got started and going out to LA. You played piano, played guitar, played bass, and you also played a horn. What horn did you play?
Well, you did your homework. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Well, see, I started playing piano when I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Sweet.
Might have even been younger. My parents insisted I take piano lessons. A lot of parents did back then.
They certainly did. They certainly did.
Yeah. It was part of the matriculation of a well-educated young person to have that musical background. It's amazing. People don't do that anymore. I mean, good parents do. I think.
As soon as you said that, I was like, do you think that's something that we're missing these days because of work ethic? And
no, it's because of the cost of education and the change in the process of education at the elementary school level. And then, they don't have orchestras, they don't have bands in the schools. That's considered a very expensive feature for schools. And as I know you're in education.
Yeah.
My daughter's a teacher.
Yeah.
And it really bothers me that schools don't have orchestras. I mean, now colleges do have marching bands if they have an athletic program. At least a lot of them do, but not all. It's just that people do not get the chance to learn to play an instrument when they're young enough to have it be, part of that coordination between what you're thinking, what you can do with your hands, how you learn, and how your brain develops. Music's essential for that.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things that are going on partially with that. I think one of those are motor skills. I talk about it a lot since, like you said, I've gotten into the education system almost 10 years ago, and just getting ready to step away from that and move into whatever the next adventure is. But there's also shoe tying. I never bought my kids Velcro shoes. I never bought them, they had flip-flops and things, but I always made sure, I think that's a motor skill they need.
Right.
And I think the other thing that's that's stepping out of it too, Felix, is cursive writing.
I was just going to say that. It's all block printing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I was looking at, because I have a whole storage in my little storage of memorabilia, angel memorabilia and stuff like that. I have a library of it. But I found a bunch of fan letters. Some time ago, a few years ago, I was cleaning out, as you do, closets and boxes and stuff that follow you around wherever you go through your life. But I found these fan letters from Angel fan letters addressed to me and also addressed to the other guys in the band. And the reason I had them was because when our management office, Toby, the Toby org in Beverly Hills, went out of business, Warren Etner, who was one of the partners there with David Joseph, he called me up, and this is right before I moved from LA to New York. And he said, Felix, he says, there was a bunch of letters that came to the band, and we didn't know what to do with them. So we put them in a box, and we still have them, and we never sent them out because you guys all moved to different places. And so, and I have other things, he said, which I do have, some gold record and the original artwork for the band's albums, the first album.
Oh my God.
The Angel actual logo.
Yes.
Well, not the logo itself. It's the image of George, our, the band's icon.
Yes. Right.
But Warren said, here, Felix, why don't you come and get this stuff? So I did. And I went to his house and we hung out and had a nice meeting. But I got this box and I didn't open or read. It was full of all these envelopes, probably 100 or more.
Wow.
Maybe more than that. And so I threw them in my storage wherever. And when I moved to New York, I threw it in the wherever and didn't even look at it for probably, I don't know, 20 years, 10 years.
Holy cow.
So I found it recently, and I had poked around in there years and years ago.
Okay.
Thinking, what is this, and what is, what's in there?
Right.
And I remember looking at it, and I wasn't taking the time to look or read the letters. I just looked at a couple of them.
Okay.
And there was letters from all over the world. Fan letters. People used to write fan letters to bands. Now, maybe people still do that. And I apologize if I assume that they don't, but they do. Right. But I know that at least back then, that was a popular thing to do.
Yeah.
And we used to get, quite a few of those. So anyway, I looked through it, and man, just incredible stuff.
I bet.
It is. And,
I mean, you're talking about sentiments that were written to you, about you, that were decades old, right?
Pouring their hearts out. And I mean, really tender, beautiful stuff from people who 15, 16, 17, I mean, at that age when you're going through past puberty and you look at some picture of some guy in a band and you go, oh, that's, I love that band. I love that guy. And speaking of the writing skill, I mean, the cursive writing skills were really great.
Yeah.
And these were not kids from affluent families and went to wonderful private schools in most cases. Mm-hmm. They just learned to write because that's what schools taught you back then. I know my school did.
Yeah.
And, so anyway, those letters are still with me. I'm starting a website, which I've been putting off for years, but I'm almost done with it. And when I get it done, I'm going to post some of these letters because some of them are just golden. I mean, just wonderful. Yeah, really cool stuff.
Well, I do graphics too. So if you need anything, let me know. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
I will.
Yeah, but that's just got to be, let me tell you, Felix, I've got my Kiss album back here because I know how that was at the time when Kiss did their last album on Casablanca,
Uh-huh.
and it didn't do well. And I fell in love with it
Oh,
and wrote them a letter. And I'm like,
nice.
basically just thanking them for getting back to what I liked about them.
Right.
The reason
You,
I got into them, and I'm like, I'm still here. That's the, you
right.
know,
You got
I
it.
and it's still in my record. I never sent it, you know. When I get
Oh,
to a certain point here on this
yeah.
channel, I'll pull it out and read it.
Well, you should. I wrote one letter.
Hmm.
Now, I can't say it was a fan letter. It was an appeal to a songwriter producer who I wanted to work with. And this is back when I lived in the St. Louis. I lived in Belleville actually at the time. And pardon me, there's a helicopter going over. I don't know if you can hear that.
It sounds
But
like, to be honest, it sounded like somebody was flushing a huge toilet.
ah, I hope not.
I hope
Uh,
not too.
but I wrote a letter to Van Dyke Parks.
Oh yeah.
Now that may not be a name that you recognize.
Not completely. I know I've heard it.
Look him up.
Okay.
A very obscure but famous within the songwriting um, compositional side of the music business. He produced so many great albums that you wouldn't know who the producer was.
Harry
Look him up.
Nilsson.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Brian Wilson.
Brian Wilson. Yes. Little
Yeah,
Feat.
yeah. Oh
Ry
man.
Cooder.
Oh yeah.
Silverchair. Holy crap.
I'm telling you. And when I said the name, you didn't recognize it, did you?
I recognize the name because I
Okay.
have a lot of albums by these bands. So
Right.
and that's what I mean. It's like, I know I've heard it, but no, I couldn't have told you any of that without looking that up.
Yeah. Well, I knew who he was, and I had been to LA, and I recorded an album as a studio musician with a producer named Jeff Barry, who was a really famous songwriter from the 50s.
Whoa. Uh-oh. I lost him. Hopefully we can get him right back. Oh, there it is. Hey, sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Oh, I'm here.
Good.
Where did I drop?
You were talking about Mr. Barry.
Jeff Barry, and so I had worked with a famous producer. I had watched them work and seen how they did what they did. I was in the band that he was producing. So when I got back to back to St. Louis, sorry, at this point in time, I was researching who are good producers that I want to work with, and Van Dyke Parks was, like, I guess at that time, I thought the guy I needed to contact. So I wrote him a fan letter, how wonderful I thought he was, and
That's awesome.
how terrific it would be if he needed a bass player. Yeah, I'm sure the guy maybe gotten other letters, but he got mine. But anyway, we write letters. I used to write letters to people, and
Yeah,
people don't do that anymore.
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah, I write letters. I draw on the envelopes and send
good for
them.
you.
And I
Good
was
for
just,
you.
what else I noticed? It says here, since then, he has established himself in motion pictures.
Oh yeah,
And here you go. 1980 did Popeye.
right.
And also Brave Little Toaster in 87 years later in 87.
Well, he was influential to me.
Yeah.
I tended to latch on to songwriters and producers before I would say latched on to bands themselves. You mentioned Little Feat.
Yes.
That was Lowell George and
Oh my God.
some great studio musicians. But it was built around his talent. And of course, he was just a member of that band when he joined it. He didn't occupy the leadership role until some time had gone by.
Wow.
Some musicians rise through those situations to become the leaders of the bands. Or in his case, I think, and I've read about him, the more difficult personality to cope with had to have things his way. And
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be, that's something I'll be eager to talk about here in a minute when we get into the Angel thing, too. How do you feel about that when, I mean, there has to be somebody at the lead, not necessarily in a dictatorship, but somebody has to look to somebody. And sometimes there's different leads for different things in a band, like
Sure,
somebody's
there's
in charge
somebody
of
might
this.
have, exactly.
Right.
I'm in charge of business, or we'll call it
Yes.
scheduling.
Yes.
What's the reality for today? Arranging. Now, I did a lot of the arranging for Angel, and
That's
it was
cool.
not, people just didn't say who arranged that song. It was not even listed on our albums who was the arranger. But if you know much about how music is produced and composed, then for a songwriter, they will understand that the arrangement is a very important part of how songs become whatever they become.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a song starts with an idea for a chorus and maybe a lyric for a verse. And in rock and roll, it can be very simple, but how you put it all together can become a lot more complex and a lot more interesting.
Amen to that.
Yeah. And the arranger is going to be the person that, or whoever contributes that organizational part of it, it can be very essential to the final product.
Yeah. And I think I think in the knack, I know that like vocal arrangements and things like that, a lot of that stuff was done by Bert Navarre. And I had a chance to talk to him years ago, and it's interesting when you say that, because I think that I would like to do it, had I gotten started in music sooner, and would have been in more of a writing situation. I think that would be where I would stand out, because I have that thing where I had a friend of mine who had some songs. I'm like, you know what you need to do here? We need to do this. And then let's try this from this song and put it in with this. And,
Right.
It's great fun to put that stuff together. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And and my talent was not so prolific as a songwriter, although I have 1,000 unfinished songs that I've written, and I should be collaborating with somebody to finish them off. But I needed to collaborate with other people to write songs.
Yeah.
And I did that. But my talent was more in the arranging side of things. So I would hear the idea, but I'd hear it in different ways. And you sit down and you go, wait, let's try this, but don't do that then. Hold on to that, and let's add these other ideas too. So yeah, arranging is an important part of it. And I remember the knack. Doug Feiger was a guy that I got to know a little bit. The record plant was the recording studio that we did. We did practically every album there, but we did parts of our albums in different places. This is talking about Angel, not White Lion.
Yeah. Right.
White Lion, we did our album in Germany. But for Angel, it was at the record plant mostly. Some at Cherokee, some at Chateau, but record plant. And that's where I met Doug.
Wow. Yeah, he was a sweet individual, I'll tell you.
Yeah. I didn't get to know him well enough to agree with that, but I think he was probably like that.
Yeah, I met up with him, I guess 3 times. Once was in Chicago, after they did they had the Zoom album, and they were up there at Chicago playing, and they had and then out at NAMM was one of the other times, and he was just standing there. Yeah. I walked over and started talking to him, and he remembered talking with me there in Chicago, and then Pat Torpy was just down the way, and he said, yeah, he's playing with us now, just prior to him passing away. So,
well, that is that album and that hit song, that is the difference between a hit band, a hit album, a hit record, and what happened with Angel. You know, that is what makes a band very successful, and everybody knows the song. And I mean, everybody knows My Sharona.
right.
But who knows an Angel song? Well, an Angel fan does.
Yeah.
A real Angel fan will know every song.
Right.
I could tell you every song in every album, but you can't pull somebody off the street of varying generations and find somebody that doesn't know.
Yeah.
My Sharona. They can sing it, because there's nothing to it. It's a beat and it's the words. And so why is that? Why did I bring that up? Because it struck me when we were talking about it that, that was the thing that eluded Angel most, was that relentlessly memorable hit song.
Yeah.
And it was what drove the band in the last 3 years from, I call it, the record company and the management side of things. Yeah. It was, you got to do this, write a hit song. You need a song like this, and you can point your fingers in different directions at different bands and recognize how many bands there were that had that hit song.
Absolutely.
Whatever it was.
No, well, let me, I don't know if I want to ask you this yet, but maybe I will. What I was, when I was doing the research here real quick, I was noticing that you would, in an interview, you had mentioned, and this is one of those things, Felix, that I don't know that I really thought about it. And when I read the headline on the bit, I was like, yeah, you're freaking right. I think when in the article it said that you were talking about, if we'd have just stuck with it, we could have made a bunch of cool power rock songs.
Yeah, we were on the right track. A lot of bands came out in the 80s that followed that formula. And I can't say that some of the more famous of those bands were terrific musicians. I mean, I don't want to name names, but a lot of the music was pretty elemental, very simple. There was nothing spiritual or philosophical in the lyrics. It was all rock and roll, getting high, getting laid, all that stuff over and over.
Yeah.
The imagery was another step beyond what Angel had, which is the gigantic. We didn't have the gigantic hair. We had, pretty boy hair. But those bands that came out like Poison and Motley Crue, and you and I could just talk for, there's 20 of them, if there's 50 of them. And some of them did very well. But they had bigger hair. They had videos. We didn't. They had all those things that formulaic as a product,
right?
And so, when we talk about what Angel didn't have, we didn't have a lot of that stuff. So what?
Well, yeah, and it was kind of a new era, and then there were bands that came. Well, and this is where I really think about it, because there's bands that came through that time frame, like that to me, and it's it's in the past, but all the same, when I read that, I thought that does make sense, because there's bands that came through that era, like Journey.
Oh yeah, great band.
They were something different when they started, and then they came through that, and all along they'd had some songs that were simple, that were things that could catch.
See, I think they were a little different because they're just fantastic musicians, and you could listen to it just on a musical level.
Right.
And the drive, the power behind the stuff in the early stages was pretty darn good.
And that's what I mean. That's where I was saying they are very similar to what you guys had. There was a big,
yeah,
you know,
similar. I'm thinking about, as we're discussing this, what was going on then and what was changing to me was the development and the songwriters. I mean, Joe Jackson, Elvis Costello, and bands that had a better sound, you know, for the songs that they had, and very pleasurable stuff like Squeeze.
Yes.
Pop music from very hip, you know, groups. I mean, I loved Squeeze, still do to this day. The Cars had, you know, this kind of different sound. So the music was diverging. You had the heavy metal, beginnings of heavy metal, with all those hair metal bands. And then you had the singer-songwriters like Elvis Costello, and we could go on with the names. There's lots of them.
We sure could.
And they were all new. It was all new stuff.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
So, you know, it became a great, you know, field of music. Nowadays, that stuff is still the popular music. It's what I listen to.
Yeah.
I guess I'm like a lot of people that are, you know, of my generation, that I don't find that much new music out there that I want to listen to. Some things, for sure.
Yeah, there's some things. Absolutely. I mean, and that's what I try to cover here is, you know, is a lot of these new bands. There's the Midnight Devils that are out of Nebraska that are kind of an 80s with punk thrown in there. Them. So it's got a real big energy, you know. And you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that people just aren't going to hear about.
Well, send me your list. I'd like to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's another well, out of the UK is Toby Jepson with Wayward Sons. That's another huge, big favorite of mine. They've had 3 albums now, and now Toby's even putting out more solo stuff too. So, but he was with Little Angels back in the late 80s into the 90s. And it's brilliant. 3 records. They really tied them together on Frontiers, and it's fantastic. So real thought-provoking lyrics, just
cool,
great music. So absolutely, I can send you some of that.
Are they young people? Are they people in their 20s?
Their guitarist is young. Their drummer plays in the Down and Outs with Joe Elliott.
Okay. Cool.
And then their bass player was in a band called Chrome Molly from out of the UK.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, so Nick is, you know, he's older. And Toby he's older, you know. He's about my age, you know, 50 something, you know.
That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I mean, I really am. I'm trying to find a group of musicians that I can play and perform with that are trying to do what they do, but at the level that I could fit in with. I don't want to play with beginners. I don't want to play with people who are, I'll call it, jaded and been struggling for many, many years. Never got there. Just want to play blues rock. I listen to radio stations here in New York. There's some great college stations. And that's what I tend to listen to hear the new stuff, because the college radio is going to be where I'll find bands that I never heard of. And a lot of them are kind of boring and repetitive and not that great, but some of them are really interesting.
Yeah, some of them really pop out. Yeah. Another one that I like from over there in the UK is, and they're getting ready to come through here, is called The Narcissist Cookbook. And it's just funny, off the cuff, kind of theatrical at times, but very humorous. So, but you know, the funny thing about that too, Felix, is that I know that Dave, he was a he's a horn player and a keyboard player,
Yeah.
and for certain reasons had to step away from Wayward Sons. So I don't know. They did their latest record and they've been on tour mainly with the four of them this time around, not five. So I'll have to hook you guys up.
Well, back to the original topic of playing a horn.
Yes. Right. See how that comes. It all comes back.
I don't know how much more time we can spend on all this, but
we can. However it goes.
We're bouncing all over the place here. But when you mentioned that, I thought that I should finish the answer. Yes, I did. I did the first horn instrument after taking piano lessons, and this was sequential. So piano. And then when I got into, and I was in the grade school orchestra because my friends were joining the orchestra. And I had seen a trombone, and it was so weird looking and so cool, the slide. And I had to, so my mom rented me a trombone. Which I might have bought one. And I played trombone the first year, but I took the lessons and I learned to play it. And but I saw the guys in the trumpet section were having more fun. And so I said, I got to have that. So I got a trumpet. I mean, I was relentless. I was going to be a musician. There was no doubt about it.
Wow.
My parents didn't impede that. They helped me. But they considered it an extracurricular activity. They didn't think I was going to become a musician. I don't think. But so then trumpet. And then the Beatles came out, or already were out at that point, but I got into that. And but then, of course, I played guitar and learned to play bass. But I played bass and guitar, actually, in one of the early bands that I was in was a horn band, because in St. Louis, you had to play soul music. The bands from New York, the bigger cities, were already getting into acid rock.
Gotcha.
And in St. Louis, we were a good 10 years behind everybody. So the bands that were working were playing soul music, top 40, Temptations, Supremes,
Shy Lights,
Sam and Dave.
Yes.
All that stuff. And
Al Green.
It was before that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But, so while I was still in high school, the year I graduated, I joined Bob Cuban's band.
Sure.
You're from St. Louis area, so you know who that name is. But of course, people who may watch your podcast may not recognize that name.
Right.
Bob was big, man. His band was the band in St. Louis. It was the working band. It was where a musician, you knew you were going to work 3, 4, 5 nights a week, all one-nighters. And every night you got paid,
Yeah.
And you also got fined. In Bob's band, I was just a kid, man. But if you screwed up on even a note, he was because he was a music teacher in his day job, and or for years he was a music teacher, and I remember he would put the stick in his teeth and hold up his hand and go, $5 if you screwed up. And I did that a couple times in the very beginning, and I didn't make any mistakes after that.
I'd been screwed. I'd have been screwed. I make mistakes constantly.
Right.
That's it's part of my charm. That's what I tell people.
All right. Well, everybody does, and I did, and I learned that early on that there's 2 different kinds of musicians. Not to divide everybody into this category, but at least at that point in time, to me, in my mind, there were 2 different kinds of musicians, and I knew both kinds. I grew up with both kinds, but I gravitated towards the second kind. The 2 in my mind were musicians who want to be great musicians and musicians who are working as musicians, meaning you had a job playing. Not mutually exclusive, but you could be a really good musician and work as a musician and earn money, or
Yeah.
you could be a fantastic musician who sits around with other good musicians, or maybe not. But the point is, you basically practice
Right.
and dream
Hmm.
and do things, but you're not working. And not
Yeah.
to degrade or demean anybody who would be in that category, because I think a lot of those great musicians that I knew wanted to work.
Mm.
They just didn't have the drive or the willingness. In some cases, it was the willingness to compromise.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And, right. And the compromise was, I'd like I'd like to learn every song that was ever composed or performed by, name the band, Pink Floyd,
Right.
um, or in a horn band, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, or I could pick a
Oh,
bunch of great horn bands, but
wow.
you know, even Blood, Sweat, and Tears, they had hit records that got played on the radio, and we did those songs in Bob Cuban's band. We did the hit records,
Yeah.
but we didn't learn the obscure stuff. And I
Gotcha.
knew musicians that would learn all the obscure stuff on every album
Mm.
because it was great jazz rock.
Yeah.
But you couldn't play that song in a club and have people want to hear it because you wanted to dance.
Right.
And if you were going to play in clubs in St. Louis back then, you had to play dance music.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of what I try to do with my band now. We're a cover band.
Yeah.
And I may pull some obscure stuff or maybe newer stuff that people may not know, but it has to be as danceable or fun as
Right.
all the other stuff that they know and love.
That's
Right.
right.
Because
That
I'm
is
like,
right.
I can't just sit here and go, oh, well, I want to play this song. And you're like, okay, nobody knows it and they can't dance to it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but
Are
I
they
want
going
to
to be
play
willing
it.
to sit there for 5 minutes, 4 minutes? How long is someone willing to sit in a bar or any place and listen to music that they don't recognize?
Yep.
Unless it's all about the musicianship.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
it's not jazz. If you're playing popular music, don't confuse yourself. If you're not a jazz musician and at that level of skill where people will just watch you because you're so damn good
Yes.
at your instrument, which is a wonderful thing. And
Mhm.
I know some really good musicians. I'm not one of them. I never was. I tried to be. And personally, I learned early, like maybe you did, which is that if this is going to be my vocation,
Mhm.
then I've got to find a route that takes me in the direction of performing and getting paid to do it.
Yeah. A lane in which I can stay.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
there's times where I was singing things that I thought, well, I don't know. I don't know if I have a right to be singing this, just before my technique got better. But, I would
You
try to
sound
stay
like
in.
a singer. Your voice sounds like you're a singer.
Oh, well, all right. Yeah, I love it. When I learned that I could play and sing, I started when I was 36. So when I found out I could do both, I was like far out.
So
I
you
don't
play guitar and
I
then
play
or
bass and
bass?
sing.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
I
I'm the
didn't know
lead
you were a
guy.
bass player. I didn't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I know it's really interesting. I keep thinking about it and I'm like, I have a lot of bass players on my show, which is fantastic.
Why not?
You know?
Well, the guitar players or the more showboat size type of guys
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
You've had Frank Domino, you said, on your show.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
been on here a couple of times with me. Yeah.
Right. Frank, great guy. Great
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, let's dip our toe into that then, because I know I gotta let you, I don't have you forever today. I want to make sure that I stay with our schedule. So let me ask you this. A lot of times I have like
I got about another 20 minutes if I can make it that.
perfect. That's
Cool.
perfect.
Right.
So a lot of times I'll start off with what I call a lightning round, but I just have some of these lightning round questions are fitting within this time frame. That's kind of perfect. When you joined, this is going to be kind of one of those questions in like 3 different words that you could use. what would be, I joined Angel at just the what moment? Because let me put a little context into this beforehand. When I think of your situation with Angel, to me, it reminds me of Timothy B. Schmidt. It reminds me of Bruce Hall, because when I've talked to Bruce Hall before, and I said, dude, you joined at just the right time, because everything was blowing up. The live album, bang, you were in the movie FM. And I'm like, you hit it at just the right time. So I was just wondering what a few thoughts, like a few words that would say, I joined at this moment, and the way I saw it, it was what?
Well, it was. I don't make up answers. I'm going to try to think of the right answer.
Sure, absolutely, appreciate that.
That's okay. Because I remember that time very clearly. I had moved to Los Angeles to be back in the music business that did not exist in the town that I had just moved from. I wanted to be in a band that was making records and doing well at it. So my answer to the question is, I joined Angel at the right time for both of us, for both myself and for the band. I was perfect for that band at that time, I think.
I can agree, because I love White Hot.
Good.
Good. I love the cover. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I love the cover and I love the songs. Not that it, and as with everything else, it doesn't take away from the ones prior to that. I'm just saying, when I got into it, that was one of my favorites.
Oh. Well, that album began with my starting to write songs with Punky and Greg and Frank before I joined the band.
Right.
So they had asked me to start helping them to develop the songs for the album when the other bass player, Mickey, was still in the band.
And who introduced you guys?
Conceivably. Well, I've told this story before, so I don't want to get too far into it.
No, that's just a a name and just how that works.
No, it's all right. I met them in St. Louis when they played at the Fox Theater.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Today, I was just talking to my friend Lon Lemaster, who was the keyboard roadie for Angel at that time, and he's from Marissa, Illinois.
Wow.
And he lives in Australia now, but we still live together. So he was. We lived together in Venice Beach. He was the keyboard roadie for Angel. Wow. I had just moved. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I was still in St. Louis, and Angel was playing in St. Louis at the Fox Theater with Stars.
Yes.
Stars was opening and Angel was closing the show, but they were kind of co-headlining.
Yeah.
Although Angel had the headlining slot. And I had gotten a call from Eddie Biggers, who worked for Yale Music, Bob Heil, and had brought the PA and was running the PA system for the Angel show. Awesome. This is back when Angel was renting everything. And I came down to see the band because Eddie had called me and said, Felix, you got to get down here and see this band tonight. I'm mixing their show and they need a bass player. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, they have a bass player, but they need you. And I was like, okay, I'll come down and see him. And I did. I was playing in bands back in Illinois and working hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came down and got introduced to the band, and they went on their way. And I stayed in St. Louis for another 6 months, and then I moved to LA. But it's all connected, so I'll make this quick. It might be confusing. The reason I moved to LA was because I was offered a spot in a band that was being formed by Bill Sherrick, who was Angel's tour manager. Okay. And Bill wanted to be a manager, not just a tour manager. So he was starting a band built around a songwriter Jeff Ross, who is now with Peter Asher.
Wow.
And he is also a performing musician. He performs with Badfinger and with the Lovin' Spoonful. So he does these tribute things, not tribute, I'm sorry, original bands. And Jeff is very prolific now. But back then he was an aspiring songwriter, and Bill was his manager and trying to build a band around Jeff. Needed a bass player. And I moved to LA to join that band. But of course, as I've already said, Bill was also active as the tour manager for Angel. So
Gotcha.
when I got to LA, having already met the Angel 6 months before, things were not doing well with Mickey's involvement. And that's a whole other story that I don't need to give you the information on.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
I just, I was offered the opportunity to join a band that was at that point ready to make a very serious leap into trying to write and perform music for radio play.
Yeah.
Not just make album-oriented rock albums. The music business was changing. All the things we had talked about previously, it was all changing. It was about writing hit records. So, and we could go through the number of bands that came out those years. 77, 78, 79. Who came out then? We all know this. Most of us know the answers to that. It was the Cars.
Right.
It was Cheap Trick.
Cheap Trick.
Journey.
Yeah.
REO Speedwagon.
Styx was changing at that time.
But they were coming on strong.
Yeah.
And all the bands that we played with and headlined with, and
Foreigner.
Judas Priest came out, they were opening for us. Florida, the Babies.
The Babies. Yeah.
Thin Lizzy.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Kansas was just bouncing in there, man.
Yeah.
What a great band.
I mean, what a great year for you to be in Angel and releasing a record along with Point of No Return, Grand Illusion. Queen was having
Queen was doing great.
Bad
Company.
Yeah.
We could go with so many great bands.
Yeah. 77. What a killer year.
So that was a good time. So the answer to your question is a good time for me. It was a good time for the band.
Yeah.
And I'll add one more thing.
Sure.
My first rehearsals with the band, after I really had already started writing songs with them, were so exciting. So much fun. Barry Brandt needed a bass player that could make him drive. He's such a great drummer.
You're not kidding.
So much excitement there.
Yeah.
And so when I came into rehearsals, we just had a ball with each other. I think for him it was a possibility to really just let loose everything he could do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I'm when I do talk to my fellow bass players, I'm happy to know exactly what you're talking about, because when you get that drummer and you just play off of each other and there's an excitement there that it's unique and cool. It's amazing.
A lot of bass players are drummers themselves. I'm a drummer.
I always wanted to be one.
Well, I bought a set of drums. I had a set of drums when I was, still living in St. Louis. And I used to do pickup gigs. When I was in Cuban's band, this memory just came back to me. I used to offer to drive the band truck.
Oh yeah.
We didn't have roadies. We did it ourselves, but we didn't have that much gear. I mean, it was a lot of gear, actually. It was a B3 and everything. But I was offered to drive the band truck because I could take it home and unload it into my basement at my parents' home because I was still in high school or
Yeah.
just out of high school. And I would set up Bob's drums, and I would record the band on my 2-track Wollensack tape recorder when we performed. And so I would unload the whole band's, not all of it, the drum set for sure, because it was in the back and easy to get out.
Yeah.
And I think I told Bob this maybe. He wouldn't have liked it. And I would set up his drum kit in my basement and put on headphones with that 1/4-inch tape and learn how to play drums by playing his kit with him actually in my headphones, because I'm hearing him play, and then I just duplicated what he did. That's how I learned the drums.
Wow. That's cool.
It made me a better bass player, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, right. Right. So when the drummer's asking you to, when you're thinking about locking in, you know what you're talking, you know what they're saying.
Well, think about the next night. I have to load up all the gear back the next morning, drive to the next gig, unload it. We always played the same sets generally in the same order. So now I've just played all the drum parts with the drummer, and I'm back on the bass on the bandstand.
Absolutely.
You think I don't know every little note, everything he's going to do on every song?
Absolutely.
I'm like, he's like, boy, that guy knows everything I'm doing.
He knows all my licks. What's going on?
I could play them all. Now, he's 1,000 times better drummer than me, but at least I knew the parts.
Right. Right. Wow. That's now do you guys do like so here it was your first album with Angel and you get immortalized in a painting by Eddie Leonetti.
We were just talking about that when I was with Frankie and Punky in St. Louis, and when we went on to the other shows that we did in April. And the subject came up. I don't remember how it came up, but somebody gave us the album to sign, and we were autographing the album, White Hot. And I remember saying something about how I had to have my painting done separately. And Punky or Frank goes, no, we all did that at the same time. And I said, not me. I remember very clearly. I had to fly to Boston because the other guys had sat for their portrait with the guy that painted that album cover. And I can't remember his name. I used to memorize it.
Eddie Leonetti, I think, right?
No, Eddie was the producer of the album.
Eddie was the producer? Oh.
Yeah. The album cover was painted by an artist. And he had a company. So right. Wow, that was really bad of me. I apologize. No, that's okay. The guy's name escapes me, but he's a very nice guy. He lived outside of Boston in this really cool house on a lake. I mean, and he was kind of a hippie dude, very nice, real artist. I mean, a beautiful studio in this cool house. And so he actually painted also the cover for Arlo Guthrie's album that came out at that time.
Wow.
And he had Arlo Guthrie's album cover on the easel in the studio while I was sitting for him and getting my portrait done by him for inclusion on that album cover.
Wow.
He was a really cool guy. And
I
I flew to Boston and got picked up, driven to this place out in the country, to this guy's place and sat with him and for him. And that's my part of that album.
The cover concept is by David Joseph and Chris Worf.
The concept is one thing.
Right, exactly. The painting is something else.
Because that concept was, Chris Worf, I think, was the art director for Casablanca Records.
Okay, I gotcha.
I'll find out who the artist was.
I'm like, why can't I see that? And I should just know that. That's one of those things I ought to know.
I think his company name is on there, isn't it? Gribbets.
You know what the worst part is about my copy that I got? When I got into Angel, the live album was out, and I went back and bought all my cutouts, but all of my albums, some of my albums just had this, didn't have the.
Oh, it didn't have the liner
No.
notes. Yeah,
But
man.
you know what?
Well,
I was looking at the liner notes a minute ago,
yeah.
and I wonder if I can
Eh,
see it on there.
we'll figure it out. We
Yeah.
don't have that much time left, so
No, you're
it,
right.
it'll
Yeah.
get resolved.
You're right.
Anyway,
Right.
thank you for asking. It was a good time for me. It was a wonderful time. I could give you so many great stories of that
Yeah.
time in my life because they're all easy to remember, especially because we just did these shows together. I had such a great time. I had to
I
do it.
could tell.
When they asked me to do that gig, I went, of course I'll do it. I mean, and I didn't care about whether it was going to be lucrative or whether it was going to be a pain in the ass, whether the weather would be good, whether anybody would even show up. To me, it was like, okay. And we only had 2 nights of rehearsals before we went on to those shows.
Oh, wow.
We didn't rehearse for a week, uh, even 3 days. And you may not realize this, but half the songs on those shows were songs that I had never played with the band.
You're right. Yeah.
They were
Wow.
Angel songs from other albums. And, Punky and Greg, Punky and Frank had also done 2 or 3 other albums with Angel, recently.
Yeah.
So there were songs from the newer albums that I had never played and songs from the original first 2 or 3 albums that they decided to add to the set because a lot of people loved those songs and those
Yeah.
albums.
Yeah.
And when we had been performing, when I was in the band back in the 70s and 80s, we didn't do those songs. So anyway, I had to learn probably 6 or 7 tunes for the shows, in addition to the songs that I already had performed that hadn't played in 40 years.
Wow.
A long
Wow.
time, man.
It was a blast to watch the show, and it was a blast to watch you play. It was great
Was it
to
good?
see one more piece of that lineup that was back then.
An old guy with gray hair trying to fit in with a band that's still playing, and I had a great time. I had a great time.
Yeah, I'm really proud of those guys. I'm really for getting it rolling, and thankful for Danny working with Punky, and then you having the chance to work with Punky on his solo record too, right?
Yes, I did. He had been trying to get out of not being performing. He wanted to get back to it, and he called me, and Danny had a lot to do with that, man. He was like, "You can do this. You can do this." And I said, "Sure." What you may not know, and I don't think a lot of Angel fans know, is that Punky had lived in New York for about a year almost, for not long. But he had moved here and moved not far from where I live right now.
Wow.
And we had gotten together, and this is back in, I'm going to say, 86, 87. And had, because our daughter was very young, and we live in Forest Hills. That's where I am right now.
Okay, cool.
But Punky had moved with his girlfriend to Flushing, which is a town, the next town over, part of the suburbs of New York City. And so we had gotten together and tried to get together, get a record deal. Had met with Bill Aucoin, who is managing Kiss, and so he had started writing songs, and I had started working with him on that. So that goes way back, long before this whole development of him coming back into the thing and starting to record again. But Danny had a lot to do with getting Punky back into activity. And yes, I did the album Fallen Angel.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, I love that record. I had a lot of fun listening to that. And
good record.
David McMacken?
Who's that?
Is that who the artist was?
Oh, the artist. You mean from White Hot?
Yeah, David McMacken. Is that what it is?
That could be.
It's a little blurry because I took a screenshot,
Okay. Well, look
but
him up and see what else he has done.
yeah, let's see. It says graphics though is, oh boy,
Look
that's
up
even worse.
look
Vito Gribbett. That's
Ribbit.
who did the graphics for the album, I think.
Yeah. That's the graphics design.
But I think David McMacken,
Maybe
it
look
looks
him up.
like. Hopefully we found it.
I'll stay with you for a minute. Look him up. See what else he's done. If he did Arlo Guthrie's album, that's the guy.
Let me see. It's MAC, right? Yes, MAKEN, I guess. And see what it does. Discogs. Well, yeah, that's a good start. Beach Boys, Wichita Fall, Frank Zappa, 200 Motels. I didn't know that was the same artist.
What did he do though for them? Painting? Drawing?
Yeah, he did that cover.
Okay.
And he did the artwork for Overnight Sensation.
Oh.
Also, that Cat Stevens Greatest Hits album with the flag.
Wow.
Right?
Keep going.
Flo and Eddie, Weather Report, Temptations.
See if he's got Arlo Guthrie in there.
Kansas. I'm looking for Arlo here, see if it shows up.
Well, there's an Arlo Guthrie album that had a hand-painted, a portrait of Arlo in the album cover.
Yeah, I remember that one. I trying to.
He is really cool. I like him very much. Always did.
That is amazing. Yeah, I'll have to check that because I've got 200 Motels and the Cat Stevens thing. That's kind of like Phil Hartman, comedian, actor.
You know who's one of my very closest friends? This is trivia for you.
Who?
His name is James Grashow. Grashow. A-W. James Grashow. And he was the guy that did the Jethro Tull stand-up album cover. He did The Byrds.
Wow.
He did some really great album covers.
Wow.
And did he do Blind Faith? I think he did Blind Faith. Anyway, he's a buddy of mine, and I didn't know that he had done those album covers. I knew he was an artist.
Right.
And he has a summer house near where we had a summer house, and so we got.
Oh, that's cool.
On the beach. Yeah.
Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, there's the album, the Jethro Tull album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been into Jethro Tull a lot the last few years, and so when you said it, that's what it is. Yeah, I remember it. I love it. Yeah.
Artists and musicians. Great combo.
Wow. I think that's so crazy when we realize, and again with Phil Hartman that he did the Poco album cover with the minimalistic horse and the greatest hits for America, and it's just so amazing at how good an artist he was.
I joined Poco for a while.
See, that's what else I was going to ask you. We'll have to get together again because I need to let you get rolling, but we need to get together again and we'll chat about all the other stuff because I've done that before where I focused on a certain band and certain something that somebody does, but I'm like, I know you've done a bunch of other things.
Well, I did little things. It doesn't deserve a lot of time, I played with Steppenwolf for a couple of days.
Wow.
The Poco thing, which was more than that. And a whole bunch of different musicians and talented people that I've performed with.
I'm trying to remember Billy's last name. He played in Badfinger for a long while, and he also had played years prior. He played in Mott the Hoople, and I said, "Man, I'd love to talk to you about this." Is long before I ever thought about doing a show, but I said, "I'd love to talk to you about it." He goes, "I really don't want to talk about it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, fine."
Well, you should interview Jeff Ross.
Okay.
For your show. Jeff has great stories.
Perfect.
Because having worked with Peter Asher now for 10, 15 years, and you know who Peter Asher is.
Yes.
And a lot of your listeners on your podcast may not. They should look him up But Jeff
Yeah.
Ross would be a great interview for you. And he's very active.
Wow, that's great. Maybe I'll do
He's still a real good friend of mine.
That's great. Well, let's keep in touch about that. And
Okay.
then I may ask you for a little help on that.
I will help you.
That'd be
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being on your podcast, Stuart. It's
And
a lot of fun.
Thank you for all your contributions to those Angel albums. And we will have to get back together because I do have a couple more things that I'd love to ask you about.
Okay.
And I'll organize those, and we'll just do another quick show about that stuff. And
we'll do it
because I do want to get into some of those where I just do quick little short shows and we find out about a few little questions. So
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you can hang tight with me for just a second, I'll talk to you backstage after we're done here. Just a quick minute, if you got it.
Got it.
Awesome.
Thanks. See you later.
All right. Well, thank you. Anything you would like to say before you go to everybody?
No. Just thanks to anyone who remembers the bands that I performed with or remembers anything about me. I appreciate you paying attention to this point. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks for thanks for your contribution too to the White Lion stuff all those years ago, helping.
That's a whole show in itself. That is a long show.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of stories there.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I will throw this up. Thanks, guys. I appreciate everybody here. Remember to like and subscribe. It's a great thing. We love to do this, and I'm glad to be doing it for you. So definitely take care, folks, and do awesome things. Thank you very much again, Felix.
Be well.
Ha ha ha!